All right, so I'll be the moderator for this panel. So it is a critical supply chain panel focusing on funding, innovation opportunities, and technology. So I will do a brief introduction, but maybe ask each of you to give a quick 30, 60-second overview of yourselves. So we have Anna Mkrtchyan, and she's the Vice President of Finance and Business Optimization at Amaroq Minerals. We have Stephen Crozier, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, VP of Sustainability at Wyloo, and then we have Zeeshan Syed, President at Avalon Advanced Materials. So Anna, just a quick overview of your responsibilities and of yourself.
Hi. So my responsibilities with Amaroq Minerals go across all the functions of finance, but also I'm now responsible for business optimization as we move from construction to operations, and we are going to be dealing with a lot of incremental improvements, and we'll have to start adapting more of the technology and innovations. So that's coming next.
Thanks, Anna. Stephen?
Hi there. So Steve Crozier. So as Vice President of Sustainability with Wyloo, my role, sustainability can encompass a range of things. In my case, it covers government relations, indigenous relations, permitting and environment. So it's really about bringing all of those things together in respect of advancing our proposed development projects here in Ontario.
Thank you. Zeeshan?
Hi, everyone. I'm Zeeshan Syed, President of Avalon. We're one of the critical minerals companies in Canada and looking to teleport ourselves into the future. So look forward to the conversation here.
Thank you. And so just to start off the conversation, because you're in different areas and have different experience with the industry. So what have been some of the biggest challenges in progressing towards a more technologically advanced industry from the supply chain perspective within each of your operations? And maybe what are some of the mindsets that we need to let go of? I think, Stephen, we'll start with you on this one.
Actually, this comment, I think, Zeeshan, this was your comment we had a coordination call before the panel, and I think it was you that said, and forgive me if it wasn't, but that we have a modern industry that's still in many ways set in the early 20th century in terms of like how we think about planning and execution of our work, and really that is one of our biggest challenges. And I recall, I won't say which company, but within my career, not my current employer. We coordinated kind of like a planning session with a range of disciplines in attendance, and we invited, some guest speakers. And there was a guest speaker who attended, and it was a technologist. And they said, very candidly, they said, listen, respectfully, you guys are dinosaurs. There are problems being solved in other sectors very easily, and you guys are struggling with some of those same issues. And all you need to do is just look out your window and borrow insights from your neighbor. And I think that's part of our journey. And there's a natural conservatism in our sector. It's, the cost of failure is high, and with that has come a bit of a bunker mentality in terms of what kind of solutions we will accept. And finding ways to interrogate that and enable a bit of experimentation in a risk-averse industry I think is one of our biggest challenges.
Thank you. And so, Zeeshan, you want to take that?
Yeah, no, that's very well said. I think part of that is that insular kind of thinking. Mining's been around for a long time. It will be around for a long time. So this is the way we do things, and it is what it is. But I think all of us can see, even from the events of the last 24 hours, that the world is changing very rapidly, whether we like it or not. And so there's this element of what do we need to do to understand those macro kind of top-down factors, and what do we need to do to evolve? So there's a lot of analogies in the energy sector, even in the oil and gas industry, which we'll get into, I think, which I think speaks well for what the mining sector can do going forward.
And Anna, your view on that, you've went through several different positions in the industry, so now being at a junior mining company, what are your views?
So I still think that we have to learn how to fail, and fail fast, and fail early, and cheaply. So we'll have to, yes. So that's I think that's the bottom line, and like from my recommendation is always, especially from an innovation project's perspective, we have to adopt pipeline methodology and look at it from the portfolio perspective. Don't focus on one solution only. So and then that goes even further. So from the systems engineering, so we have to like be much better in terms of adopting the systems engineering and just be aware that our operations are integrated. So we have to start looking at it as an integrated, and stop like looking at a solution just for underground mining or just for processing, because it has the knock-on effect on the bottom line from the holistic integrated perspective.
And if you have any comments you want to add, feel free to jump in any time. But if not, we can go to Stephen for this next question, which is looking at the open development model. And so Wyloo, the operation is very interesting. You're at a very interesting and critical point. Maybe just speak to that, really what your approach is in getting there.
Sure. So I will say that, part of what I'm advancing kind of represents a part of our development model. So it's not, there's we've got other disciplines, and, our project side is advancing a lot of thinking. But I think part of what it is that we're trying to embrace is around transparency and really radical transparency. And sometimes when I introduce this topic, they say, "Oh yeah, no, we've done transparency. We put a lot of information on our website." And I've said, no, you don't understand the kind of transparency that I'm envisioning. And when I think of transparency, just as a rough analogy, our tendency is to kind of marry transparency when we think of like disclosure, like we're going to put more information out there. And I don't think that's the kind of transparency that people want. And I don't think it's the kind of transparency that's particularly effective. Like it just as a rough analogy, that kind of transparency is more like disclosure. That's like what you look like after you've gotten ready and you're walking out your front door. The kind of transparency I'm envisioning is more what you look like the moment you wake up and walk past the mirror. It's all the things that you don't necessarily want people to see, but surfaced in a way that it can be usefully actioned. Because people I appreciate that our sector has been for some time focusing on, we need to tell our story better. I fundamentally disagree with that. I don't believe that people want to hear our story. What they want to understand is it accurate what we are telling them? And for that, they need to be able to see behind the curtain. They need to see how it's collected. They need to see bad news. They need to see things that are not working, because when we attempt to make it look clean and perfect and we walk out the front door and they say, look how responsible we are, they're like, I know there's stuff happening inside that you're not telling me. And I think that undermines both our engagement as well as our own effectiveness. It's like we're hiding from ourselves because we're scared of recognizing those problems. And it's just as Anna said, we have to acclimate to being short of whatever objective that we have, recognizing that failure and then correcting it. And we have done it, and I'll talk about it later in response to another question. It's just that we're nervous. We're shying away from that. I think the future is embracing it, and I think we have a profound opportunity to the extent that we do embrace it.
Thank you for that. And so going over to Anna and somewhat of a similar topic, and you previously mentioned, I think on our call, that we know where the challenges are. So by now we understand what some of those challenges are. And from your perspective, looking at what are some of the practical first steps that we can take to drive innovation, you can answer them here from a junior mining perspective.
So I think like those steps are well known. We just need to start adapting them. So and for me again, so the most important one is to start small and focus on piloting, but don't pilot only one solution. So be able to pilot multiple solutions and then promote fast to the next stage and then start adapting it across the industry. Because what I experienced so far is that it looks like companies are now open and okay to pilot, but then it doesn't go to the next stage. So we don't know how to move through that pipeline, actually. So that's one practical. And then the other one I cannot stress enough, and it's about cross-pollinating. So just making sure that we are able to be open, actually. So we have to be open for the technologies from our neighboring industries. And the other one is repeatability and being able to scale, not just within our industry, but also be able to demonstrate that our solutions, those technology solutions, are applicable to neighboring industries as well. So just don't limit ourselves if we're within the mining.
And on that note, Zeeshan, coming from oil and gas and energy, what is your perspective on seeing advanced technologies in maybe the other sectors that you've been in? What are some of the technology opportunities you see that could create greater market interest by bridging this technology gap with your operations?
And I think it's a very good question, and kind of a segue to what Anna was getting at and what Chamarai mentioned in the last segment. There is this piece of, we know what we do and we do it well, and we don't need any new ideas. Thanks for your opinion, but this is what works. But as you can see, the macro kind of scene is changing dramatically. In the oil sands, one of the interesting things that happened in Canada is Crozier, the Oil Sands Innovation Initiative. And what they basically did is the super majors understood that, look, we can put X amount of dollars into innovative technology applications, but we can make that open source. We can share that with our colleague companies, and we can pool our talents, our resources, our thinking power on that to help address the macro national GHG kind of, problem that we have. So it's a very a relevant sort of analogy that we can use in the mining sector. And when I think of what Chamarai said earlier, what can MICA do to go to that next level? There's mining guys like me. We're hyper-focused in our world. We're, got our head down, moving along. But as noted, we're very kind of sensitive to change. I think there's an opportunity to marry those technology solutions to a very archaic mining business and really teleport us to the future. That's my thematic for the entire day. And there's a real example in the oil and gas sector that we can look at right here in Canada.
Great. Well, thank you for that. So switching on to looking at the challenges around capital and some of the financing issues there. So we'll start with Anna. For you and your Greenland operations, what are some of the challenges that you have encountered in raising capital and managing budgets, especially given that you're in a very remote location, or do you have a strong bottom line focus? And where do you see the potential opportunities for government and industry to really help you accelerate funds and supply chain?
So I think the fact that we're in Greenland is not really unique in terms of how we access capital. So, and recently, all junior companies were fighting for capital, and especially for low-cost capital. So, and again, that goes back to what is like fundamentally our cost base is, and how, and then that's where innovation can help a lot, because we all know that in the mining industry we don't really control the prices. So the only way to control the bottom line is to really just keep looking at how to optimize and how to manage our costs. So that's where the budget control goes. And as I mentioned before in our coordination call, so it is very critically important for us to do the plan early. again, from a supply chain perspective, it is not a secret that due to all these geopolitical issues, the lead times with OEMs increased significantly, sometimes threefold. And that's where, like, still we are struggling with knowing door to door where our products are, and then also like having that collaboration between our suppliers, forwarders, and ourselves. Like that coordination, communication is still not happening well enough. So again, I think that adopting those cheap technologies from other industries will help a lot, but I don't have a solution. I don't know why we're not doing it, because we all order, and we know that we now have those very small applications that we can follow our order door to door, and I have no idea why mining is still not doing the same. So.
Thank you for that. If there's any comments about NSA, feel free again just to jump in on that. If not, we'll go to Stephen and look at how can we communicate capital needs in a way that better attracts investors and the market, and what approaches can we take to demonstrate that change? Well, you've already actually answered the transparency piece, but feel free to go into that. But just your view on, again, how do we really communicate our capital needs to the market?
Sure, and a bold thing to ask, sort of like a head of sustainability who's not in a finance or IR or biz dev function, but still have some observations. I think one thing that remains true, and I've heard this a lot from counterparts who are working in IR and facing the market. We're privately held, but there's still a market lens that's applied to a lot of our decision making. You hear it less when you're not a publicly listed company because you're not facing it all the time. But I heard it all the time when I was at IAMGOLD before then, and including working with other colleagues at other companies, and they would a constant refrain. We're underpriced. The market just doesn't get it. I disagree. I think the market is pretty good at sussing out when an investment opportunity is available for them to put money in and get more money out. I think there's actually legions of professionals who are dedicated to finding those opportunities for their clients to put their money to work. Lots of people are out there looking for it if you can deliver on it. Our challenge is not messaging. Our challenge is not narrative. Our challenge is on candidly assessing our own delivery. We miss a lot. We miss a lot. And we have a hard time looking at that, understanding it, and then embracing the realities of that and either finding a way to fix it or tell it candidly. Because when you're asking people to put money in, but you can't draw a line between the investment thesis, like in their entry and exit, you're going to lose the room. And I think that's one of the things that we have to learn to be able to tell our story, improve our own performance, kind of face some of these shortcomings, because I think there is capital that's there, but connecting capital to a particular opportunity, I think frankly needs a more candid assessment of what exactly is on offer and what our prospects are for success and what it's going to take to deliver on the return. Because the story, the narrative, the sector play, people can get exposure to volatility in lots of ways. They don't need more volatility. They're looking for ways to manage that volatility, to take advantage of those opportunities, not to magnify that volatility in an uncontrolled manner. And I think that's one of the things our sector has kind of struggled with. And there are those that have done better. They do deliver on performance, and they sell that performance, and they sell it quite well. And I think the rest of the sector is not yet caught up to that reality and really understanding that disconnect.
No, thank you for that. Lots of good comments there. And so with Zeeshan, looking at it from a government and so federal and Ontario lens with the programs that they have now. So again, from your background, what are some of the programs that you've recently seen come into play that really enhance supply chain capabilities, and from your mid-processing stream perspective?
Yeah, no, thanks, Lorelei, and those are really good comments, Stephen. I think what the government is correctly understanding is that the world is changing. and they correctly understand that this is not simply a mining story. This is about innovation and advanced manufacturing. Where they lack, and I don't blame them, is how to connect these dots. So Chamaraya, Lorelei, and the Micah group and Kyle's comments, they're very important. How do we go to that 2.0? How do we evolve to kind of stick our neck out and say, look, we are a consolidator of good ideas and good SMEs and good ideas for how we can help that technological change in the mining sector. That's what government needs. And from a capital markets perspective, one of the first questions that I get, I mean, I talk to lots of people, Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs, and you name it. The first thing they say, we know Canada, we love Canadians, we understand the rule of law. Where's your government on this? So to Lorelei's question, Invest Ontario in Ontario has done a fantastic job of trying to demonstrate the appetite for the Ontario government to step in and help de-risk projects with their strategic investments and help turn the mining sector into something that is future kind of forecasted and oriented. The Strategic Innovation Fund at ISET in Ottawa, they've done a great job of isolating the midstream processing or refining aspect of the business, which we'll get into later, in my personal opinion, is the key linchpin in the entire supply chain. And so the government thinking power is there, but that bottom-up response from the capital markets and from groups like Micah, I think there's an opportunity, quite frankly, to marry that gap and look grand, not just within what's possible in Canada, but how can we be a template here in Canada that can be replicated around the world? I think there's a huge opportunity for all of us together.
Yeah, thank you for that. No, all really good comments, and it's definitely good to see that the government is listening to the market needs, and there are several programs internationally. I'm sure that LA has seen that as well. So just taking a quick moment to switch to communities. So Stephen, what are the opportunities to manage site safety and operational data more effectively to build stronger relationships with communities?
Sure. Thanks, Lorelei. So I'm going to return to that earlier kind of theme I touched on in terms of the kind of radical transparency. We're talking about like uncomfortable levels of transparency. I personally think that is the future for improving performance in our sector. I think that could feed into a more candid discussion with investors, but it's also what communities want. Communities are tired of having a curated message for a high-impact industry that they know is imperfect, and when we pretend we are perfect, we lose the room. And so that's a big statement. So where do we start? How do you convince an industry that is quite conservative, quite risk-averse, and you have decision makers who are worried about the implications of heading down this path? How do you convince them to do it? And the place that we are starting, and that I would encourage the industry to start, is you don't have to. We've already done it. You just have to highlight how they did it and what effect it had and what it can do if it's applied elsewhere. And that's in health and safety. So if you look back 30 years ago, our industry had literally a body count, like tens of people killed by each company at an operation a year. And it was considered normal. You can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. The idea of buying PPE was considered a radical notion in the 90s. Like it would impair profitability. And a lot of people fought against that and helped the industry adopt a few key principles that I think if we just learned, kind of took them up to a meta level, we could apply them elsewhere. Safety is everybody's job. It's not the health and safety manager. It's a whole of company mission statement. How do you manage safety? You do not manage the narrative. You manage the risk. When something happens, you report on it accurately. You want to know your LTIs, you want to know the medical aids, and you want to know your near misses, because those are the fatalities of the future that we're trying to prevent. And if you work on the data and you're honest about your mistakes and you show it the way that we do now, you go into a mindset, what do you see? There's a billboard there, and it tells you how many days free for accidents they are. And if it's 0, it says 0. That's what we need to do. And we did it. And it worked. Fewer people go to work where we operate and get hurt or don't come home. And it's a point of pride. We just need to do it everywhere else. We need to apply it in the areas that we haven't yet. And if we do that, if we follow it, we've done it before. We've done it on really hard problems. We just have to embrace it elsewhere and foster that. Let's fail forward. Let's fail fast. But let's not hide from our problems, because we're not helping ourselves. We're not helping our relationships with communities. They see the people go to work and hear that bad things happen, but they just don't see us being honest about it. And if we were honest with ourselves and with our communities, we can improve both our performance and the conditions for trust. And that's what we're going to try to help foster.
Yeah, no, all great comments there. Again, and just that can also help with definitely attracting workforce. So Anna, some of the challenges you've seen in attracting a younger workforce, and which roles do you think could make a significant impact that maybe we're not utilizing to the best of our ability?
So again, I would be a little bit maybe generalizing, but so we all know that we have very big challenges in terms of attracting the workforce and attracting the younger generation. And it's actually, I was thinking about it, it's not just about attracting a younger workforce, but it's about the still diversity. So we talk about diversity and inclusion a lot, but practically, I don't think we were able or successful to move significantly in that direction. And so creating the conditions for even for female employees and labor to come and enter the industry. So I want to actually bring a practical example from our operations. We already have a data that female operators are more careful with the equipment, and as a result, we see less breakages and higher operating hours and less maintenance for the equipment that is operated by female operators. So that's a very tangible, practical example, but it means that we need to do better in order to attract those non-traditional labor force to the company. The younger generation, so there is a data that gamers have a much better results with the remote operations and remote control of the equipment. The data scientists, there is a very practical, huge application from the geology and data interpretation. So I think so we don't do enough in terms of collaborating with the educators, and we still have this bad reputation outside of our industry. So we have to do a much better job in terms of collaborating with the government and educators, and not only in the universities, but start with schools.
No, thank you. Thank you for that, Anna. And just on the last stakeholder question to Zeeshan, so with your operations, how has stakeholder involvement in your region reshaped and improved your supply chain requirements, especially around operationalizing your plant?
Yeah, it's a good question and a good tie-in. I think Stephen makes a fantastic point about mitigation of risk, earning credibility, as we all know. Anybody that's married knows if you're not credible, you're nothing. And Anna makes a very good point about education in general. But again, it's my strength and my flaw. I think big. You look at human nature; it's the opportunity side. Human nature is what's in it for me. It's not a pat on the head to our Indigenous colleagues or anybody in the community to say we're building this, Project X, and trust me, we're not going to damage your land or what. Great, nice story. But what's in it for me? That's the subconscious mind, all of us. So how do we integrate stakeholders into the process? In Thunder Bay, our company has a very grand vision of building a lithium processing facility, a refinery. And it's going to be a meteoric step change for Canada. And it's right, on the shores of Lake Superior Lithium, or Lake Superior. So the Indigenous communities have a very rightful question to ask. Great story. Nice to meet you. How can you guarantee you'll safeguard the water here? So it forces us to kind of think that way from a very early stage, and not preempt the questions to come. But so I think the upside, talking about the upside, and that's kind of my thematic today with what I said about Micah, I think Micah's got a powerful role as a convener of all these good ideas for morons like us that are just kind of doing our work. How do we kind of marry these two things together? How can we sell this pan-national kind of opportunity to our stakeholders and really create what I believe is a viable opportunity for everybody in Canada, the stakeholders, companies, people, mitigating risk, educating people, and ultimately Canada waving that flag around the world that, look, we figured this out. Here's a template that you can kind of replicate around the world. So that's kind of my personal take on all of this.
Yeah, so I think I will ask you just a second question behind that, and getting into the global supply chain disruptions and some of the geopolitical issues that we have. So Zeeshan, what opportunities does Canada have to really strengthen midstream processing resiliency, and why is this such a critical bottleneck in the supply chain?
Yeah, no, thank you for that, and we'll have to set up another time with Lorelei as the host to talk about that, because I can go on, but you see a world that's in dramatic change. So much so, but we live in this time and space, so we actually can't see the torrent of change that's in front of us. It'll be 50 years from now where we look back and say, wow, like that period was really where things started to kind of take off in a whole new direction, and which underscores my point about the opportunity. I always see in any chaotic opportunity or any chaotic scene, I see opportunity. So the midstream of the supply chain, not to bore everyone to death, but there's a multitude of companies that have millions of barrels of whatever, or tons of whatever, which is true and it's great. Then you've got the downstream demand, the Mercedes, the Honda, the GM, as you've seen very nicely, the Ontario government kind of woo that demand, the demand pull. So the glut is actually in the middle, the midstream. And there's a very relevant historical analogy of John D. Rockefeller. Many of you will know that name. Rockefeller, back in the 1880s, 1920 period, a lot of companies drilling oil for kerosene, but oil, ABC Incorporated, XYZ Incorporated. So, and he sat back very wisely and thought, well, wait a second, these guys will get this stuff out of the ground, but it's really that refined material that the market needs. So he focused his efforts and his time, his money, his attention on that refining capacity, and the rest is history. So for us, and my personal theology is that whoever controls that midstream processing capacity really dominates that supply chain. You hear Elon Musk talk about this as well, printing money, build a lithium refinery, and it really appreciates and values the upstream sort of assets that are in the region, because they look to raise money, and the capital markets will say, great story, ABC Incorporated, you've got 50 million tons of lithium. Where are you going to send that to get refined for GM, which is right in Toronto, or LG or Volkswagen? And the answer today is China. So, I don't need to go further than that. So as we build that supply chain, we focus on the midstream. There's a lot of innovative technology. When you think of refinery, it evokes a lot of crazy thoughts, rightfully so, of smokestacks emitting GHG emissions. But the more we can integrate technology tools and applications in that, again, a very powerful opportunity I see clearly for Canada to play a leadership role in the evolving critical minerals sort of strategy for Canada.
Go ahead, Stephen.
I was just going to say, it's partly an innovation story, but it's also like a market structure and industrial policy story. And look, China is dominating globally because they're doing capitalism better than we are. We have to learn to play this game again. We are not as good as we think we are. They are pairing public sector investments with private sector investments at a scale and at a pace that is mind-blowing. And they went from being the world's workshop to going vertical into primary supply, refining, and absolutely dominating these sectors. And so there is no path to decoupling from China. Like, that ship has sailed. It's sailed conservatively for at least 100 years, possibly longer. We are talking about rebalancing. And I'm speaking to some bankers just in terms of like refining capacity, smelting capacity. Those investments tend to be made in a pretty idiosyncratic inefficient, suboptimal manner. Why is that? It's because very few assets actually have the kind of financial return and scale that justify going downstream. And so those downstream investments tend to be made accidentally. And where they are, then the returns tend to compound. And that's Glencore's made like a living off of this, basically shuttling concentrate out of producers, keeping a bunch of the return to find that excess capacity to get it somewhere so you can get to market. So if we want to move the needle, yes, innovation is going to be part of it, because you're going to have to be able to convince Canadians, a skeptical public, that we can do more processing here on like how are we going to protect the water? Will our communities be safe? These are important questions to ask. But the other thing we're going to need, you're going to need industrial policy to work together with industry. The sector will not, the private sector, the market is not going to fix this on its own. Like we are going to sit here buying more things from China for a lot longer unless we step up on our planning. And technology is a part of it. It's not the only part of it, but it's got to be paired with better industrial policy.
And pardon me, Lorelei, but I want to re-emphasize that point. It's a fantastic point. I think it's part of the nature and the psychology of Canadians. We're very kind people, very congenial, very well. We need to be a bit more bloodthirsty, to be quite honest. The world is changing faster than we can imagine. We read the news, we see what's going on, and is Canada going to be on its back foot or its front foot? We're a new country, whatever, I don't want to embarrass myself, but 150 years, so maybe we don't have that entrepreneurial kind of spirit, but make no mistake about it, our older cousins down south, sure, they're our friends, but they'll pat us on the back, on the head, and they will do what's needed to make sure that they keep their foot on the throat of whatever entrepreneurial opportunity there is. So it's really a story of lifting all boats. We need to work together to really have an ambitious strategy, an industrial strategy, as Stephen talks about. This isn't a mining story. It's all about innovation, advanced manufacturing, and where we see the economy going the next 25, 50 years.
Thank you. And yeah, definitely we can get into that even just on the DOD and DOE funds we're seeing come up here quite quickly. But just, I know we're, I think, almost out of time for a panel. So Anna, just any closing remarks you'd like to make off of the comments Zeeshan and Stephen made?
Yeah, I actually want to add, and maybe it will be counterintuitive, but I think it's also about modularity. Being able not to just scale up, but scale down when the economic conditions are not favorable. So I think that's also some of the challenges that I've seen, like with large operations, like with Glencore's Sudbury operations. So we have to be, it's about not just being able to shut down, but how we can scale down also.
Thank you very much. I don't know if we have time for one question. Yeah, one question. So anyone has a question, please raise your hand, and there'll be some microphones coming around. Yeah. Shamar will volunteer to do the running around.
Thank you for a great panel. Sorry, it's somehow like a comment or some sort of proposal. Is not. I have two comments as a newcomer to Canada and as a newcomer to this gathering. First of all, to facilitate the supply chain in Canada, you see different certificates in different provinces. So maybe to easier communication, to easier, faster communication, faster delivery. It can be maybe federalized. I don't know. If I'm wrong, please let me know. But this is less than 1 year I'm here. So I think could be faster and easier this way, that this is a national-wise standard, national-wise certificates. This is one. And the other one is like the shortage of workforce, of manpowers is, there is a point that here experience outside North America are not welcome. Means if you are 25 years experience in other country, you are entrepreneur, but here you're not used even a fresh engineer. So maybe to help the industry and to help the minerals, I don't know, all industries, maybe it can be we can find some way for it. This is my comment. Sorry if it is not related maybe to the panel, but I think it would be helpful to solve these problems as well. Sorry.
I think the gentleman's point is correct. It's all about foreign credential recognition. I think we all have stories about getting into Uber cabs or Uber cars, and it's a Polish neurosurgeon driving that car, and we're like, what the heck are you doing? He's driving an Uber. But so I think it's a germane point, and it underscores really about that jobs and reskilling and upskilling of the Canadian workforce. And really, if you look at the totality of what we're all talking about, the macro challenge is so large, we need all hands on deck. So whatever the government can do to help expedite some of the very legitimate skills that are there of our newcomers to Canada, it makes all sense to help expedite that journey so we have that talent pool available.
Any other comments on that? Or
maybe just one follow-on comment, just in terms of kind of like, Canadian federal passport type, equivalency. I mean, interprovincial competition is a major issue, and it's a major political issue in this country, and it's not one that admits of an easy fix. There's lots of industries that are subject to restrictions around trade between provinces for typical reasons of protecting domestic industry. And so that's one that will definitely represent, we'll call it a long game discussion. Unfortunately, there's a lot of incentives that weigh against kind of opening things up and federalizing and standardizing and doing it at scale, but it's a necessary conversation that we have to keep trying to push.
Okay, so I think we are definitely over time here. So I just want a big round of applause for our panel here.